What's up, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle coming to you with our tight end start and sit video for Week 16 of the NFL season. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you're playing for a championship this week, congratulations. We just got one more step to go, so let's get you over that hump. If you're still alive and you're playing for possibly a championship next week, still got some work to do, so let's get that done as well. Before we jump into all the players, though, like every single week, we got to be completely transparent. And let me tell you, Week 15 was a huge success for Jake and I. Our largest combined percentage this past week, well over 70% total. For tight ends, it's 71%. Nailed 30 out of 42 tight ends last week. Really felt good about that. One call, yes, I know. Ian Thomas, we're going to talk about him in a couple of minutes, though. I know that one didn't end up working out for you last week, but there was a lot of good calls last week still. So, hey, I'm good with it. 71%, an excellent percentage. That's definitely where we want to be. So hopefully we helped you win a fantasy football matchup last week. Also, Jake ended up finishing 23rd in the rankings last week, I believe, and I ended up finishing at 32. So we are both really high up there for our rankings as well. So it was a solid week all around for Headliner Nation. Let's see if we can do it again here in Week 16 and try to wrap it up for you all. All right, for Houston and Tampa Bay, we definitely have to be looking towards Cameron Brate and O.J. Howard this week. These two combined for 15 targets in Week 15 with injuries to Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Scotty Miller's injured now as well. So the wide receiver core is just depleted for Tampa Bay right now. Brashad Perryman is going to be the number one wide receiver basically this week. So you have to expect O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate to get a lot of work, to be honest with you. Now, I've got them listed both as starts. However, honestly, one's going to hit and one isn't going to hit. I highly doubt both of these guys end up getting within the top 12 tight ends this week. I'd be very surprised if it happens. If I had to gamble, if I had to go with one, it's going to be Cameron Brate. Just haven't been able to trust O.J. Howard very much this year. However, it is possible for both of them. I think they both can get in to 10 points. However, for you, unless you just don't have any decent options at tight end, I might not risk it with these two this week. Yes, the opportunity is there. However, Week 16, I don't know if we want to put our faith in these two guys. The reason I have them listed as starts is because one of them is going to get to 10 fantasy points next week. That is why. I don't know if you're willing to risk that. Now, on the other side for Fells and Akins, not going to go with either of these guys. Really, with Kenny Stills being healthy, Will Fuller being healthy, and DeAndre Hopkins being healthy, add in Duke Johnson getting some targets. These two guys, they're just not really doing enough when all three of those wide receivers are healthy and on the field together. This matchup is just not a good one for tight ends. Not trusting any of these guys. Yeah, Croft got in the end zone last week, but it was his first touchdown in basically 2 seasons. So I'm not going to expect him to do the same thing. Both of these teams are really, really good against the tight end position. Neither of these tight ends or any of these tight ends have had really any upside at all this season. So we're going to leave all of them on the bench this week, and we're going to find better options. Since Week 13, Tyler Higbee has 53 fantasy points and is the number one overall tight end in half PPR rankings. Now, here's the thing. Tough matchup against San Francisco this week, but I am still rolling with him. I will put him in my lineup if I own him. He's just been far too good recently to not do that. And with George Kittle's always in your lineup. Now, I have Jimmy Garoppolo listed as a sit. I don't see a huge day for him. However, I do think Kittle gets more than enough volume to get inside the top 12 tight ends. And even if we thought this was a poor matchup, it doesn't matter. We're starting George Kittle no matter what. Since returning 2 games ago, Austin Hooper has 6 targets in both of those games. And with no Calvin Ridley this week again, we're going to roll with Austin Hooper and put him in our lineup if we own him. For Jacksonville, that position for them has just been a wasteland this year. I don't expect anything to change with that this week against Atlanta. So we're going to skip on those tight ends. But if you own Austin Hooper, he's still getting plenty of looks for Matt Ryan. It's going to come this week. We're definitely going to have him in our lineup. Yeah, last week I was a little bit worried about Mark Andrews' upside. I had him listed as a start, though, so he's still a hit. I had him just listed a little bit lower in my tight end rankings because I was worried about his health, but he looked good last week, so I expect him to look good this week against Cleveland. And as I said in the quarterback episode, I don't expect any of these starters to sit this week, and if they do sit, they've already put up more than enough numbers for you to be happy about having them in your lineup. Mark Andrews, again, the number one target for Lamar Jackson. We are going to roll with him again this week. Only 4 games this year with less than 6 targets. He's getting tons of volume. For David Njoku, he was a surprise inactive last week. I had him listed as a start to sit. Didn't end up counting against the numbers because he didn't end up playing at all, but ended up not even playing because of a coach's decision. So apparently just they weren't feeling it last week. Ricky Seals-Jones had a revenge game with 2 touchdowns against Arizona, but I'm not looking for that to happen against this week against a really tough Baltimore defense. Jared Cook continues to be a top target for Drew Brees, and I don't expect that to change this week against Tennessee. And then for Jonnu Smith, he ended up being a pretty good call for me last week. I had him about 11 spots higher than the expert consensus rankings and was really close to nailing his specific spot overall in the rankings. So really thought that matchup last week was going to be good for Smith. I also expect this matchup to be good. Prior to last week, the New Orleans Saints had given up 4 straight tight end 1 performances to opposing tight ends. I expect that to happen again this week. Jonnu Smith has a lot of good upside in a game that Ryan Tannehill's probably going to be throwing it quite a bit. Yeah, I know. The Ian Thomas call last week didn't end up working out, but in comparison, it was a lot better than Ben Watson, wasn't it? Here's the thing about Ian Thomas, though. All of the stats that I gave to you were awesome stats. The research was there. The thought process was there. It just didn't end up working out, which absolutely baffles me because Carolina was down by at least 2 touchdowns at one point, playing against the Seattle Seahawks, who had given up the most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends over the last 4 weeks, and he just didn't get a whole lot of looks. I have no idea why. But with Will Grier playing this week, a rookie quarterback, I could see either Olsen or Thomas being a guy that he looks to quite often. So I'm going to list both of these guys as starts. However, if Olsen plays, Thomas moves to a sit. If Olsen doesn't play, then Thomas will stay as a sit, and Olsen will obviously be scratched out because he's not playing. So just keep that in mind. If Olsen's playing, we're not playing Thomas. Now, for Jack Doyle, he's let us down again, okay? After the Eric Ebron injury, really thought Doyle was going to go on to have an excellent end of the season, but he just hasn't done anything. He has not eclipsed 30 receiving yards in 3 of his last 4 games, and this is a tough matchup. Carolina's been pretty good against tight ends this year. Not going to trust the matchup this week for Doyle. I'm actually going to go ahead and pivot away from him, list him as a sit, and going to find a better option this week. You're going to see this a few times in this episode. The tight end position is a wasteland in some of these matchups, and this is another one. Mike Gesicki, though, I say it every single week, people. He does the opposite of what I suggest. I said it the last 2 weeks. I'm going to list him as a start. He's going to end up being a sit. So guess what? I'm going to list him as a sit this week, and he's going to be a start, just the way it's been all season long. Let's come back to this video after the weekend so you can all say, hey, Kyle, guess what? Mike Gesicki was a start. So I'm going to list him as a sit. He hasn't done enough for me this season. He's been hit or miss. Yeah, he might score a touchdown here or there. I'm not trusting them, though, in the fantasy football playoffs. So I'm going to sit him this week. And here's another matchup where there's just no tight ends that I'm going to trust. Yeah, Ryan Griffin was doing good before he ended up going down with the injury. However, I'm not trusting either of the guys that they've been using since then. McDonald obviously ended up being out last week. We'll see if he can play this week. With Nick Vannett, he's not doing anything. So another matchup where there are no tight end options this week. And let's just go ahead and make it 3 in a row. Another game, no options, not interested in either of these guys. Evan Ingram is done for the year. Caden Smith is a guy that I suggested picking up off the waivers a few weeks back, especially if you were an Ingram owner. However, I'm not going to trust him in this matchup. Yeah, he could end up scoring a touchdown potentially, but there's not going to be enough volume. So I'm going to skip out and again, try to find a better option this week. Hey, finally a matchup where we get to talk about a tight end. We're going to roll with Noah Fant this week. He's outside of Cortland Sutton. He's the number one target for Drew Lock right now. And Drew Lock, I talked about him on the quarterback video. He's in for a pretty big week. And if he's in for a big week, it makes complete sense that his number two target, Noah Fant, is also going to be in for a big week. So 100% starting Fant this week. On the flip side, with Logan Thomas, I mean, this is a team that spent a top 10 pick on a tight end and hasn't done anything with the tight end position this year. Yep, TJ Hawkinson ended up getting hurt, but guess what? Before that, he wasn't very good. So they haven't been using the tight end position. I don't expect that to change this week. Darren Waller's coming off a huge performance. Hunter Henry, not so much, but that's all right. Both of these guys are going to be a start this week. Especially for Hunter Henry going up against Oakland. Definitely a really good matchup for him. And then for Darren Waller, yeah, he's had some really, really good moments, some really high upside moments. Yeah, there's been some games where we're like, can we really trust him going forward? But again, the dude's got so much volume this year. We're living and dying with him in the playoffs, especially in championship week. So if you own him, you're going to play him. Zach Ertz will likely be my number one overall tight end this week. Dallas Goedert, he's going to be at the very end of the spectrum in terms of what quarterbacks I'm starting. I think he can get potentially towards that top 12 just because there's been so many injuries and because Dallas just hasn't been that good against tight ends this year. But I'll tell you, with Zach Ertz, he's been the tight end one since week 11. Dallas is giving up the fifth most receptions to tight ends right now, and they allow 14 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. So definitely Zach Ertz is going to see that volume. Dallas Goedert, we're going to hope that he gets into the end zone. He has been averaging 6.6 targets per game, though, since week 11. So seeing a pretty decent amount of volume. With Jason Witten, yes, he ended up being a miss last week because I had him listed as a sit, scored a touchdown, decent game. Not going to go ahead and roll with it this week, however. I'm not feeling it. Philly allows less than 10 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. They've been really good against the tight end position. I'm looking more at the wide receivers and, of course, Zeke Elliott this week than I'll be looking at the tight ends for Dallas. As I get ready to start talking about this matchup, I realized when I was talking about the last matchup, I talked about how I was going to watch Dallas's tight ends quite often. So there's that for this week. However, for Arizona and Seattle, Charles Clay, we're going to toss him to the side. Yeah, he had a touchdown a couple weeks ago, but it doesn't matter. We're not going to roll with him. We're going to leave him out on the waiver wires. For Jacob Hollister, though, huge week incoming. Now, a few weeks back with the Will Dissly injury, a lot of people jumped on Hollister right away because he had a big game after that. And we thought, you know what? Hollister is going to continue what Dissly's been doing. However, he's been pretty disappointing since then. But he gets Arizona. Most fantasy points allowed per game to opposing tight ends have been awful against tight ends this year. Every single game, there is a chance that your tight end is going to score. Again, I'm talking about tight ends scoring. We're getting off the walls here. It's the end of the season. But for Jacob Hollister, he's going to be definitely a top 5 option for me this week. We're definitely starting our man Travis Kelce this week. If you own him, he's in your lineup. On the flip side, though, for Chicago, again, another team where the tight end position just hasn't done anything all season. But expect a really good game from Travis Kelce, a huge performance again for him. You're going to be safe with him in your lineup this week. And last but not least, Jimmy Graham, Irv Smith Jr., we're going to list them as sits in this matchup here. For Kyle Rudolph, though, I'm going to put him in there because I've got a feeling that Kyle Rudolph is going to score against Green Bay this week. Green Bay, they're a middle of the pack when it comes to stopping tight ends. Adam Thielen is back. That's really kind of hurt his value a little bit. However, I think Kyle Rudolph is going to find the end zone in a tough matchup this week where there's going to either be a lot of back and forth scoring or there's going to be a ton of defense. But I think Kyle Rudolph is going to be the guy in the red zone this week that's going to get you a touchdown. So I think he gets within the top 12 tight ends this week. However, again, though, just to clarify, yes, I have him in the start column. But that's because I think he's going to get to a specific amount of points. That doesn't mean that you're going to put Kyle Rudolph in your lineup. So if you're thinking about doing that, we really need to evaluate what other options you have. If you can get your hands on a Jacob Hollister, you do that instead. With Kyle Rudolph, again, might score a touchdown this week. I think he finds the end zone, but other than that, probably not a ton of volume. And that's all she wrote. There you go. The top tight ends that we're going to start and sit this week. keeping our fingers crossed. I think another good week is incoming, Headliner Nation. I think a lot of you are going to get some fantasy championships this week. So good luck this week. Don't forget, though, the rankings episodes will be coming out. Our live show this week is tonight, if you're watching this on Thursday. So this video is dropping on Thursday. If you're watching it on Thursday, make sure you come back tonight for the live show at about, we're going to end up going live at about 8:30. But however, with all that being said, if you're new to Headliner Nation, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell notifications. Let us know in the comments below if you subscribe. Also, make sure you hit that like button. Let us know if you have any questions. We'll see you on the live show. We'll catch you on the rankings episodes. Great week coming up, ladies and gentlemen. I think we're going to have another killer week here. Let's get at it. Have a great one, and I'll catch you on the next episode.